Rosalee, I have Rosalee de la Foret with us, and I know you're busy. You're about ready to take people from all over the world through your online course, Taste of Herbs. And I know that the enrollment for the course is only open for a couple more days. It closes tomorrow, Saturday. So I can only imagine what your life is like right now. So thanks for carving out some time with all of us today. And I know your time's tight, so I just want to jump right in. And
Great.
I know you have so many years of being so passionate about helping people discover the world of herbalism and natural health. And I know, your courses, and especially your upcoming course, Taste of Herbs, you teach a lot from the kitchen. So my first question for you is, why do you think that one of the most important ways to learn about herbs really, it's why it starts in the kitchen?
Hmm. Well, to be honest with you, and I'd actually like to hear your thoughts too on this because I know this is how you like to teach too. But I think one of the best reasons to start in the kitchen is because it's fun. and and when we start something that's fun, it's just way more obviously fun and interesting than something like rote memorization or just being stuck with our nose in a book. But I also, beyond being fun, I just think it's the most effective because there's something different between reading a couple paragraphs in a book or reading a whole book and a difference between going to your kitchen, actually putting things together, making a remedy, and then using that remedy. It's empowering, it's fun, and at the end you can be proud of this thing that you made. So that's why I really like it. And also, it's just so practical. We're already in our kitchen at some point during the day. We're eating throughout our day. And so by having things that, are just naturally a part of our life, it makes sense. And, you could be an herbal librarian, like you could be spending hours of your time just reading books on and on and on. But, an herbalist is somebody who does something with that knowledge. Even if it's a simple thing like making a delicious cup of chamomile tea. I mean, that's what an herbalist does. So those are some of the reasons why I like the practicality of starting in the kitchen. It's fun, it's easy, it's empowering, and it just makes sense that you're doing something with what you're learning. Um, I went to a traditional public school, and that was pretty much like you listen to the teacher talk, and maybe you have some homework at home, but it's not fun homework normally. Maybe you did a lot of reading, and this just is not a fun learning style for me. Whereas, actually getting in and getting my hands dirty and making something really is. How about you? Do you have something
Well,
to add?
I'm a kinesthetic learner, and if I
Mm.
can read it 36 times in a book and be
Yeah,
like, oh yeah, but if I do it once, I got it. It's like I get it.
yeah.
And also I have a year-long course where I've been training women to become home herbalists, and it's in its
Mm.
21st year.
Wow.
And, I just learned so many things from being with those women. And what I've noticed is that when they do it, they get it. And so when I first started teaching, I used to try to teach them everything I knew. And then it
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh my God. And so now for the past 15 years, we just slow way down and we just
Mm.
go recipe by recipe, and they get it so much more. It's an embodied study instead of a brain
Yeah.
study. So I'm into embodied study. And the other thing that I've really noticed is that when it's in the kitchen, there's usually someone else around.
Oh,
And
that's
the
nice.
other big learning curve is I feel like what I've noticed from my students is that if it's just them, it's still kind of on their to-do list. But if they engage someone else or do it with a friend or have a medicine making group or just one other person engaged in the process, it just goes to a whole other level. And
Mm-hmm.
that happens in the kitchen, so
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
even
those
if
are such
and,
good
and
points.
and usually there's someone around going, what's that? And as soon as you share it, it's like it settles in your psyche, because you've
Yeah.
spoken it and it's embodied. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that term, embodied. I went to a structural medicine school, which is like color work, a role thing, and the teacher was all about embodiment. And I took a quiz, or we had to do this. It was a test, like an aptitude learning test, and I was 70% kinesthetic learner. So we have that in common, and that's probably why we both like to teach this way.
I'm just trying to get back to playing in the mud, actually.
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
still love to play. It's like, oh, I get to muck around, right?
Mhm.
So, oh, good. Yeah, that's great. That's a great question. And, I know for years you've helped people find natural solutions to their chronic health problems, since I think 2006. And I know that's a lot of dedication. That's a lot of dedication. And so yeah, I was wondering, I had this thought of like what my students, what my people would like to hear. And you know, for me, when I was growing up, I never even heard the word natural remedies. We had a symptom suppression approach to health, that period. If you have a headache, you take this pill. If you have menstrual cramps, you take that pill. And I know that many of us listening here with you today, that we were raised that way. Not everybody, but so many people. It's so prevalent in so many aspects of the culture. And so, when we first start studying herbs, it's kind of just a natural progression to say, hey, well, what herb do I take for a headache? But as we continue, we realize that the herbs are not substitutes for drugs, right? And really what's going on is that we have a mindset that's been with us for so many years that we need to transform. And that's not easy. And so I was just wondering, with all your experience of helping so many people, what would be some of your wisdom or your advice? Again, change isn't always easy, especially when it's deep-seated mindsets from childhood. So what do you have any ideas or suggestions of how to help us take the steps to change
Yeah.
that symptom suppression mindset?
Yeah, that's such a great question, especially how you framed it, just because it is very natural for us to ask those kinds of questions. And yeah, I've been interested in natural health from as young as when I was a teenager. I used to go to health food stores and like I just loved health food stores. And I would go to this one health food store and they had this book, Phyllis Balk's book, that was Prescription for Natural Healing.
Mhm.
And do you know that book?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
It
pretty
wasn't
famous.
around when I was young,
Yeah, yeah.
but yes, when
Yeah, I
that
remember
came out.
saving my money to buy that book. I was so into that book. But I would go to the health food store and just like use it as a reference. I would just
Uh-huh.
look up things, like, oh, I have this, and like look it up. And that was what that book was. You looked up the ailment, and just as you would in a Western medicine culture, and you looked up the ailment, and then you found the herbs or vitamins that they said were good for that ailment. So that's how I started. It's a very natural way to think about things because that's the culture we grew up in. That's how we think culturally. Um, but what's interesting to me is that that's not how herbalism has been practiced for thousands of years. Because we're basically growing up within this Western medicine culture. It's its own particular diagnostic system, but we have all of these different kinds of traditional herbalism. I mean, too many to count, but some of the main ones being Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, Western herbalism. They all have their own different way of looking at disease and their own different diagnostic system. And so that what I mean by that is if you go to a doctor and you have a rash, the doctor might say, look at it and say, oh, that's eczema, diagnose as eczema. If you go to see a traditional herbalist, herbalists are not even legally allowed to say that that's eczema, but that's okay because we have our own diagnostic system anyway. So instead of saying like, oh, that rash is eczema, we might say like, oh, I see you have a patch on your skin that's very red and dry. And so they use this totally other just mindset and way of looking at things. But so your question is, how do we go from this Western medicine culture that we're all familiar with into this new, bridging with this kind of different understandings of how to perform these different diagnostic methods? And I think the first step is simply awareness that Western medicine is a cultural mindset. And that just is one form of medicine. It's not the only form of medicine. It's just one. And it has some great aspects to it and some not great aspects to it, but it's just a way of practicing medicine. And that the world has a whole slew of other ways to practice medicine. So just that awareness, because that's really big. I think speaking for me personally as having grown up in this culture, I was not aware of that. It's just Western medicine is the form of medicine. It's the pinnacle of all medicine. All other medicine is obsolete. And I think culturally we get that message, or at least I certainly did.
Oh yeah.
So that's first just the awareness of that. Because once we become aware, then we can start to kind of like poke holes in things or just even widen our mindset to take in all these other things. So that would be the first thing, just awareness of that. The second thing, as an herbalist, so I'm totally biased, is I would start to study herbal energetics, which if people have been watching the videos that we've been doing with the Taste of Herbs course this week, I've gone a lot into studying or into sharing what that means, herbal energetics. And there's, literally, 30 to 60 minutes of information out there that you can get about this. So I'm not going to go into all of that right now.
Yeah, those are great videos. People should watch those videos.
Yeah, I try to really explain it just in a very practical and kinesthetic way as
I
much as
think
I
you
can.
nailed it. I
Yeah.
definitely think you
Oh,
nailed
good.
it.
Good. But basically, if this is totally, if you never heard the term herbal energetics before, what I'm saying is that, there's two parts to it. One is basically understanding your personal constitution. And by that, I mean looking at the four basic qualities, which is hot or cold, dry, and damp. And this is basically, I'm sure you've noticed this within your life. Maybe you tend to always be warmer than other people around you, or maybe you're always colder than other people around you. So it's not that what's in the thermometer, but it's actually just how you feel. And then herbal energetics is plant energetics is looking at plants, whether they tend to be heating or cooling. So for example, if you bite into a cayenne, I think most of us would agree that's pretty heating. Whereas if we bit into a cucumber, we could probably agree that's pretty cooling. And so that's what basically this is. And so it's this whole other just construct of how to observe the world. And so I think of herbal energetics as this like great metaphor, maybe overdone, but it's the onion, you're just kind of peeling back these layers, understanding more and more about how herbal energetics fits together. And so by first kind of recognizing that Western medicine is one way to practice, and then opening ourselves up to seeing things in a different way through herbal energetics, I think that's a great start into this pathway of teasing out this different way of thinking about things instead of like take willow bark for headaches, for example, instead of like looking at who is the person. And for me, I can like look back and see how I made all these different paradigm shifts along the way, going from this Western medicine mindset to a more of a herbal mindset, I guess you could say. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's like you immerse yourself in it, and then you get like another layer of understanding. And it's like, oh, okay. The cool thing about energetics that I haven't even mentioned this week, because we've been talking about it so basic, just really the basics so people can really get it. But there's so many layers to it. Like herbal energetics is very rooted in nature, and so it's rooted in the seasons, it's rooted in the time of day, and it's all these layers and natural cycles that happen. And so it really becomes permeating in your life in a very natural way. So there's so much to it. It's really a fun exploration.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that answer. Yeah, so many like you're saying you were raised in the public school system. It's like you learn a test, you take a test, you get an A, you're done, you've learned it. You pass that course, right? And it's not like this at all. It's like you learn something, but you actually don't really learn it until your life experience comes up or someone else or until the experience of your life takes it to a different place. So it's really a journey, right? Even if we all study maybe one of your modules in Taste of Herbs, we're all going to take it to a different place because of the journey of the life experience and the immersion. Like you talk about, it's an art, and you never paint a picture the same way. And I think, right, the mindset we're used to, it's like a bulldozer. It's like, take this, it takes care of that. And you're right, we just have to open up to a journey of seeing things in layers in different ways. I love that answer.
Yeah, I love your response. It sounds really beautiful.
It's yeah. I know. I studied herbal medicine, Western herbal medicine for about 4 years before I logged on to energetics, and it was like, oh my God, right? Well, okay. I was wondering why echinacea didn't always work, right? It's like it was like hit or miss, and it's like, oh, it's cooling. You got and just really noticing it doesn't just apply to herbalism, it applies to everything in our lives, right? It's so amazing. So I'm so glad you're teaching this course because I think it's really, I love all my books, I love all courses of any kind. I'm a lifelong learner, but I feel like this is a really big missing piece in or in the home herbalism studies that in a lot of what's out there. So I want everybody to take this class. I do. I want us all. I feel like we could all just kind of like upgrade a level. You know what I mean? And just get this piece and be talking with this level of knowledge and conversation. So I'm really anyway.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I definitely see it as being foundational. It's to understand herbalism as it's been practiced. And I think it's not just because it's been practiced this long in that way that's important. Because as you were just saying, I find it to be a lot more effective. And it's when I first started studying herbs, and even when I first started working with people, someone would come to see me, they'd have this, issue, I'd be like, I'd be like, oh, well, I've memorized that burdock is good for that issue, so I'll give you burdock.
Right.
And sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't,
Hit
and
or
it was
miss.
very frustrating.
Right.
Just not to say that we ever have 100% efficacy. It's a practice, it's an art. We're always evolving, but you can definitely really up your efficacy with knowing herbal energetics, and it's also just so much more fun to learn herbal energetics than to memorize stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Plus, comes a point where the memory doesn't really. So one of the things when I say is that even when you can't remember the botanical name anymore, it's like you can always remember the smell. And so people go, well, what's that herb? What's that herb? I can't remember. I said, just smell it. You smell it, you'll remember it, right? The sense is the sense of smell remembers. So yeah, I think that's a good, for someone that's just starting out, trying to make sense of all this. I mean, I think you've answered, said a lot of things that apply to that. But maybe what's advice for, just like one piece of advice for somebody who's just starting out, and it's like, oh my, it's not like when I started out, there were 3 books on the shelf. Right. I had to really scour. Now it's just like, whoa, okay. Right? I mean, really.
Yep.
What's like one thing that you would have for somebody who's just starting out?
Well, the first thing that pops in my mind is kind of, I think, the theme of our talk today, which is have fun. Because this is, as we do get to have fun, we do get to follow our passion. So, knowing what most people who are attracted to herbalism, there's something that's driving them. Maybe it's their own personal health or the health of a loved one, or maybe it's just that nature connection. Maybe it's just a love of tea. Whatever it is, find that what interests you and go for it. And, like you were hinting at, it's so easy to get overwhelmed. We have so many amazing books out there, so many, different avenues of study. So I recommend just, it's so easy to just want to dive in and do everything. But I would just start with one thing, and that could be learning one plant or starting with one course, and just trying to, bring some focus, and so you can really immerse yourself into it. And that's my earliest teachers. They always said, start with one thing, start with one plant, and really get to know it. And so again, moving away from like memorizing a whole bunch of stuff about plants to really like sitting down to that cup of chamomile tea and really, soaking it in. And so we can embody that learning. Such a great term. Embody the learning of it, and just keep it simple and fun.
That's good. That's good advice. That's really good advice, right? Just make it real. Make it not just be another to-do list, another thing I have to do. It's like keep it alive for you.
Yeah.
It's a living art. And each person will take it and take it to a different level, a different place.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Yeah, so you've got this course coming up, and I know you've taught for years. You've taught extensively about herbalism all over the country, internationally. You're the director at the amazing Learning Herbs, and I also know you're working on a book, which that's no easy, Oh yeah, I'm writing a book. So it doesn't sound like you have a ton of free time, but what was the spark that ignited like the tremendous amount of work that it takes to create and also take people through this course, Taste of Herbs. Not like you have not like you're just sitting around.
Yeah. Well, I do go through periods of insane productivity and some periods of rest. So just to say that,
good.
I'll be honest. But yeah, well, I started becoming really interested in taste when I was studying at the East-West School of Herbology with Michael and Leslie Tierra. And, that school is really focused on, mainly Chinese medicine and Ayurveda with like a smattering of Western herbalism. And so we started studying these different diagnostic systems. And I saw within both Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, the teachings always began with taste. It was such an important part of classifying herbs, of understanding herbs. And that doesn't really happen in Western herbalism, even though we do have a Western herbalism energetic, and it just, we never start with taste. We never accentuate how important tastes are. So I just kind of latched onto it. I liked it for all those reasons that we've kind of been talking about. It's kinesthetic, it's practical, it's fun. You get to do something instead of just memorize something, because you can't, you could read all you want about taste, but really you have to taste, right? So you could read a book about an apple, but unless you eat the apple, you don't understand what it is. So I just became really fascinated with it. And I don't even remember how many years ago it was now, but I started teaching webinars with Michael Tierra. And this is like kind of in the first era of webinars. They're pretty new because they haven't been around that long. But we started doing that together, and I would just choose one taste and teach an hour on it, and Michael would add in his input, and it was really fun. And so that's how I started. And I started writing these little ebooks about the tastes, and so that was fun. But and as I got like deeper and deeper into it, I became more and more passionate about why don't we talk about this within Western herbalism? And if somebody doesn't want to study Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, but they want to just study Western herbalism, this is a really important concept that can easily be brought into our understanding of Western herbalism. So I became more and more passionate about that. And so then I started just thinking about how taste is so important to so many people, like not just herbalists, but important to chefs. And then I started thinking, like, who really develops their sense of taste and their sense of smell, which are two obviously very related senses. I started thinking about wine enthusiasts and how they are just so into taste. That's like their whole focus is understanding taste.
Yeah.
And my husband's French, and I've been admittedly obsessed with France my whole life. And when we were there, we'd go to these wine tastings. They have like the wine wheels of taste. And so I thought, well, that's a great way to visually represent the taste of herbs. And so it just kind of grew from there that I started thinking of like, well, how could I combine all this different knowledge and put it into this one visual representation? And so that's how the Taste of Herbs chart was born. And I just created this like really awful sketch of like these different pies, putting all this information together and erasing it and figuring it out. And then I actually just went on Facebook and I was like, do I have any friends with graphic design help that could make this sketch into something else? And that's how I met who's now my friend Emily Hahn, and she's actually director of communications for Learning Herbs. She actually responded. I didn't know who she was at the time, but she responded, said she'd do it for me. And so I created that wheel. It looked very different back then, but I created that wheel and I gave it to my mentorship students, and they really loved it. And so then I handed it over to John Gallagher from Learning Herbs, and I was kind of like, well, what do you think? Like, I just kind of created this thing, and he was just totally blown away. So, and he was just like, this is the beginning of something big. And he's like, you're so passionate about taste. You're so passionate about kitchen medicine and recipes. Let's put this all together and make a course. And I was definitely into that. So that's how it all began.
Okay, so you really had no idea what you were getting into.
Yeah, it really did just kind of, slowly build over time. So yeah, it was, and then I wrote the course for the first time 2 years ago, and I took a solid, I don't even remember now, but it was my main focus for many months, is just creating all of that and creating it in just a way that it would make sense for people, and like all the things we've been talking about, that would be fun and practical. And so yeah, I'm pretty proud of the course because it is so much fun. And the feedback I get from it is people say, these are complex theories, complex topics, and they become simple and they become fun. And a lot of, like, we surveyed hundreds of people who took the course, and the most consistent feedback we got were people said, I finally got this. And so that's kind of makes my work worthwhile to hear that from people. It's like they got it, they own it. It's not something they memorized, but like you said, they've enlivened their senses and they own it now. It's part of them.
Wow. Yeah, just been able to take it deeper into their lives. And yeah, it sounds to me, it's like, this level of art of herbalism, it's a way that people can use herbs. They can be creative, fun, and effective, and use it within a system, of herbal theory, instead of just kind of a random symptom suppression approach, just throwing things. And so I love that. I love that you've created a system for people, kind of an intermediary place for people to meet. That's awesome. Also, what I've noticed is that when you smell and taste more, what I've noticed with myself and my students is that those senses are activated more, and that a lot of us have, our sense of smell and taste has really been kind of dumbed down, or I don't know if that's a good word, but that when we start smelling things, that what my students have told me is that they actually smell better. They smell things more. Their sense of smell is more acute, and it's like a great life skill, actually, that applies in many ways, that is enhanced when we study herbal medicine, I feel like. So,
Yeah, absolutely. That makes me think of just how enlivening our senses actually translates to happiness and joy. If we think of like if we just imagine the world that was like really blah, just be like gray walls, like just grayness, bland food. It's like if you put yourself in that world of blahness, it'd be easy to see how like things it might be harder to be like full of joy and happiness, and you're not living in this like beautiful place that I can see behind you. It's just like this blahness. Um, and it is true, by how enlivening your senses, smelling
mhm.
things, tasting things. I mean, it literally brings the world to life. It is spice of life.
Yeah, and when you read a lot of the old herbals, like the old herbal books, and even like some of like the Ayurvedic stuff, they talk about an herb how it brings you joy. It gladdens the heart, lifts the spirits, enlivens joy. Like I want that herb. I mean that's the herb kind of herbal studies I want. It's like, okay, how do we use let's have more joy. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's so much through our that's yeah, I love that. I love that. So good. Okay. Well, I know. All right. Let's do the fun part. I know you're a recipe queen, so I just want to hear what one of your favorite recipes are right now.
One of my favorite recipes
Just
are one of my favorite recipes. Well, okay, so the first thing that comes to mind is that yesterday, actually, it was my husband made this soup that was just amazing. It was like a simple chicken noodle soup with lots of thyme in it, and then it was dumplings on top. It was so good.
yum.
So that's the first thing that came to mind. But actually, one recipe that I've been making a lot of is a cranberry and rosehip compote. And so you take dried seeded rose hips and you cook that down with the cranberries and apples, and then you put some liquid in there like tart cherry juice or apple juice, and then lots of spices like cinnamon and ginger, and you cook that down. It's really easy because you just like throw everything in the pot, and then 20 minutes later you have this basically like glorified cranberry sauce with rose hips and all sorts of yummy stuff. And I actually that's a recipe that I make all the time this time of year, especially when all the cranberries are fresh in the grocery store. And so I make it all the time. I actually put that recipe in the Taste of Herbs course. And I didn't mean to surprise you with this, but I was thinking maybe the people who are watching this and your readers might like to get that actual recipe. So I'm going to give you actually a little PDF from the course that has that recipe in it. And so you can share that with everyone. So it's
Awesome.
not very
I
fun
was
to
going to
share
ask you, can I
recipe
have
that
that
you can't
recipe?
make.
Oh, good. Oh, thank you. That's
Yeah,
that's
pleasure.
awesome. That's really awesome. I know it's all about starting. It's all about having one good recipe, right?
Mm. Yeah, and this one, it's really one of my favorite. I love it. Like, we typically eat that at Thanksgiving, right? But we have it all the time. There's just a little bit of honey in there for sugar, sweetener. So it's, pretty sweet just with all the apples and the juices and everything. And I brought this the first time I made this years ago. I brought it to my niece's house, and I think she was about 6 at the time or so. And she took a bite of it and she said, Auntie Rosie makes the best cranberry sauce ever. That was so cute. So I always think of that when I have it too. I'm like, yep, it's the best ever. It's probably due to like the rose hips and cinnamon, not necessarily me. Take some credit for it.
Oh, it's good when we can get our tribe, so we're not the Lone Ranger natural remedy, maven. And it's like really good to get the young ones activated, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. She's been a good sport about it too. So yeah.
That's great. That's good. Good. Oh, good. I'm so glad that so for everybody listening, if you love learning about herbs, which if you're here with us now, I know you do, and you're into living a healthy lifestyle and being more connected with nature, which we're all working on. I know we're all working on that. I do. I highly recommend that you check out Rosalee's course, A Taste of Herbs. And yeah, I know you're getting ready to get that class rolling tomorrow. Saturday is the last day for enrollment. So I can only, again, imagine just how busy you are. Um, so yeah, maybe just before we go, one last thing, just tell if is there anything you want us to know? Like, do you have a favorite part of the course? I mean, I know you probably feel connected to the whole thing and you probably love all of it, but I bet you have a favorite part, just like one little secret sauce that you want to maybe share with us or just something to
Yeah.
inspire us?
Well, immediately two things popped into my mind, so please don't make me choose. I'll do both.
Okay,
But
you
one
can
thing
have
that pops
two
in, thank
things.
you. And these are just very specific things, just looking at the specifics. One is in the salty taste, which right now we're going to start the course with pungent taste, which is a lot of culinary herbs, so cardamom and cloves and all those fun things. And the next taste is salty taste. And when I created the course, I just really dove into seaweeds, and I had a really great time all about seaweeds. And I'm not necessarily like a huge seaweed lover, but I've been learning to appreciate them because they really they're just amazing. So I came up with some recipes that I like a salmon seaweed soup and I call a sea zest sprinkling that you can put on all your food. I also came up with a seaweed bath and a seaweed salt scrub. So I just had a really good time diving into the seaweeds. So that's one thing that just like in creating the course, I just had a really great time with the seaweed. And another one that I just really love is I love elder. It's one of my favorite plants. Elder, it's a shrub. We use elder flowers and elderberries as medicine. And one of my favorite plants, one that I use so much. And for the course, I actually created a whole ebook. And so it's like everything about elder that I could put in there. A lot of French history that I've never seen people talk about before, because the French have a very interesting relationship with elder and they use it in interesting ways. So I had a book in French that I used to help research those things. And then so many recipes, just lots and lots and lots of recipes, all with elder. So, and it's just this whole, I call it the ultimate guide to elderberry ebook. So that was another kind of favorite part of the process.
That's interesting. So it's really neat that that's like not information that you'll really find anywhere else.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I like the seaweed part because seaweed, it's so good for you. But for some people, it's like, oh my God, how do I do that? It's such an overwhelming flavor, right?
Yeah.
So overwhelming. So that's good. I look forward to those recipes actually. Good. So, yeah. Well, I wish you the best of luck. Thank you for all your hard work. I know how many people you're going to be helping. And if there's anything else, yeah. So, again, I know that Taste of Herbs it closes Saturday, enrollment closes Saturday, November 7th, midnight Pacific time. And so, yeah. And then you're going to get rolling, right?
Yep, we're gonna dive right in. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me. It's just a pleasure to finally meet you, and so we have so much in common. It's been really fun to chat with you. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right, Rosalie, take care.